we were discussing earlier, why do people come to these sessions just before you came in? And perhaps I have a slightly cynical view, but I think sometimes we come for a bit of blatant plagiarism. You know, what ideas can we get, what ideas can we steal that we can bring back to our own organisations? Now, Discovery is the name of our programme, which I'll explain a little bit more about shortly, but it would also be true to say we really were on a journey of discovery as we sought to create a blended learning solution. So let's see if I can get this to work. Yes. SSP is an organisation that I'm guessing many of you would never have heard of. Yeah? Anyone heard of SSP? Oh, a couple. Okay, that's normally better than I get. We're actually an organisation that you will actually know through the brands that we operate. But before I share some of those brands, what do? Well, we operate in retail, food and beverage, in airports and railway stations around the world. Again, SSP, you'll be going, don't know the name, but when I put this slide up, I think you'll begin to know some of the brands from Starbucks to Marks & Spencer Simply Food, to Burger King, right through to Prunier Cabaret House and the Pasty Shop. You've got a real range of food and beverage offers. And the reason I wanted to put that context is that we're talking about today a program called Discovery that was how do I become a manager? How do I step up into a management population? The people who are on the program are supervisors, hourly paid team members who are moving into their first ever managerial role. Working in railway stations, the end of platform 7, it could be rainy, it can be cold, it can be damp, not always the nicest place. And certainly not the harbinger of the most amazing technology in the world. So we had some real interesting challenges with infrastructure, which we'll talk through. In terms of where, oops, what have I just done? In terms of where we operate around the world, we operate in over 32 countries, as remote as Thailand, I was to say Australia, I'm not sure that's remote, but it's a long way away. We all operate in airports predominantly globally, but in the UK we have quite a significant railway presence as well. So those of you who have travelled here by train today may have stopped off and got a coffee at Cafe Matazza or a baguette at Upper Crust, are all part of the SSP family. So what are we actually talking about in terms of what we do and what we're doing from a learning and development perspective? Essentially, my mission has been to create a global ladder, a leadership ladder, to build succession for our organisation, particularly from an operational perspective. I don't know if you can relate to this, but it's a bit of an old joke, but it's true to say that we didn't exactly have talent pools, it was more like talent puddles, and what we had to do was think, how do we build, particularly operationally, that pipeline? So if I'm a supervisor and I want to become a supervisor, the Pathfinder program can help me do that. Discovery, as I say, is all about becoming a manager, and then we move into programs that help people become managers of managers, multi-unit managers, Pioneer, and so on. So our goal is to build this pipeline. And I would always say from the very beginning, I often show a slide, our core purpose. What is the purpose of learning and development? Well, for me, it's to make sure we help people be better at the job that they do today, and to prepare them for the opportunities of tomorrow. That's really what, for me, L&D is about. And that's why the succession pipeline was so important. It's that helping people to be ready for the opportunities of tomorrow. What does that look like then from the Discovery program? What was the Discovery program? Well, essentially, as I say, a program to develop future managers, the typical, most of it taking place in a classroom. There was a number of personal development activities, the personal development plan that you had to go and do back in the workplace. For example, maybe sit in and do an interview, conduct stock checks, things that managers have to do that you would build in as part of your personal development. We got people to do a project, so for example, driving sales, it may be improving customer service, reducing costs, a project that they would come back and present as part of their overall final evaluation. Everyone was evaluated onto the program, which in most recent years involved people coming to an assessment day to come onto the program, and then they were assessed coming off the program. So all of these elements existed, and to be frank, there was almost nothing from a blended learning perspective that was currently at that time being used for Discovery. And in terms of numbers, we were having around 100 to 120 people a year in the UK going through it. The key question was, of course, how many managers do you need to be developing internally? There's no point having 400 people on the program if at the end you're only going to have 80, 90 vacancies a year. In addition to this Discovery program, we had something else, which we call the Academy Live. And the Academy Live was our e-learning portal, built in partnership with a company called The Working Manager, TWM. We had a mantra that Academy Live was about giving you control, giving you empowerment. Anytime, anywhere was the mantra that we had, was our vision for Academy Live. Very much giving you that ownership. So we had this tool, and in terms of what it looked like, this is a typical screenshot. This was the original iteration of Academy Live. And what you can see, there's lots of learning content, everything from book reviews, articles, podcasts, tests, e-learning modules, the typical kind of content that you might expect to see, but made also local with our own SSP content being added in as well. And one of the key things for us here was that partnership of creating our own content along with the content that working with TWM provided us. So we had this site. This site, though, also needed to be something that was literally remote. So we wanted our district managers, or we call them operations managers, to be able to take the tool on their laptops and be in the business, not stuck in an office somewhere. Equally, team members can be using this kind of technology in units to be trained. So they might have their iPad, learning how to make the best cup of coffee. They might be in the meeting room or at a training centre, actually learning how to do stock taking. So there's sometimes when PCs are being used, sometimes when mobile devices might be used. And one of the challenges, which I'll come back to at the end, is this idea of infrastructure. The PC on the left, as you can probably see, is not exactly state-of-the-art, to say the least. And these PCs are very busy PCs. Everyone's using them from stock taking to putting payroll information. So using it from an e-learning perspective, there was a lot of time and energy just trying to fight your way to get onto using the machine. So that was a problem. And we had to think about how we could go mobile to achieve that. But why change? What was the rationale for the change? Well, fundamentally, this was driven by a desire to make our discovery program a level 3 apprenticeship in management and leadership. And we had a number of reasons for wanting to do that. From an internal point of view, it was that robust succession. We know we needed to build more internal capability for future managers. We knew that, to be honest, having the qualification element would make the program more credible. It would make it more robust. We would have to benchmark ourselves against the standards required, and we knew that would certainly be areas where we met it, but equally we knew there would be areas when perhaps we didn't meet it. There was an element of the fact that, and some of our finance people got very excited, government funding. Oh, hang on, this money we can draw down. And of course, yes, that is true. Within certain parameters, you are able to draw down funding. What I'm delighted to say is about 55–56% of the people who went through the first wave of our discovery program were not funded. So this isn't about, well, you can join it because you're funded, but you don't fit the criteria, you can't. There's no discrimination here. Everybody goes through the program, regardless of whether or not the company receives any funding. And what we've been able to do with that funding, as you'll see shortly, is reinvest that into the program, both the look and feel of the blended learning, but also to expand it to allow more people to be part of it. The other point I'd make is around line management accountability, and one of the key benefits for us, giving people visibility of where their people are at on the program. And partly that is about understanding not just the immediate line manager, but his or her line manager and their line manager. So a district manager structure, regional director, typical kind of operational structure you'd have in a retail company. We wanted to give everybody the ability to see what was going on to the level that they needed. So what actually changed? Well, I mentioned people going on an assessment day. One of the things that we did was put onto Academy Live, our e-learning site, a number of pre-screening tests, and the pre-assessment became completely online. So there was no longer any need to bring people physically into a room to do the initial assessment. So there was a small cost saving there in terms of travel time, the cost of people being out of the business, etc., being in one location. It also gave us the ability to pretty much eliminate paper-based material. Now, there are a number of benefits to that. Yes, there's a cost saving, clearly, but also the practicality of being able to update paper-based materials compared to just going online, changing the workbook online or any other content that can be done almost instantaneously. So there was huge benefits in speed in updating. And I'm sure your business and your organisation is no different. Change happens very quickly and very frequently, so we needed to update stuff. We'll talk a little bit more about the line manager piece. As I say, I think that was absolutely critical, and anyone considering, certainly in a retail organisation, going down this route, I think understanding the role the manager plays and giving them access to management information is absolutely critical. For those of you who are aware about apprenticeships and other such qualifications, there are certain requirements, such as key skills in maths and English, which again, we needed to include. Now, we didn't already have that content, so again, we needed to find a partner, and we found a partner in an organisation called I Can Qualify, ICQ, who have worked with us to seamlessly link their auditing testing through to our Academy Live site. The other thing we brought into the programme that didn't exist before was the e-learning courses. Again, went out, found a provider. This time it was Hemsley Fraser, Demos, and we got a suite of e-learning modules that we now began to link into the Discovery programme that people could do. Now, as yet, the UK hasn't made the decision to remove any of the current 6 workshops, but they've added in content that's now being used for e-learning. So there could be an opportunity, if they wish to do so from a cost-saving perspective, but we don't believe that just putting everything online is the answer. It truly has to be a blended approach. Now, the revised Academy Live site, which we built working with TWM, as you can see, it's a little bit cleaner, not so many articles, options on the left-hand side, but it became easier for people to navigate. And as someone on Discovery or any of our key programs that you saw on the globe, if I'm doing Discovery or I'm doing Pioneer, that button comes up. I click that button and that's my access to the world of all of the content that I need to be able to complete the Discovery program. We wanted to make the user experience more user-friendly. I mentioned the pre-screening that we did to come onto the apprenticeship. Again, TWM, Demos, there's content available, but we had to create our own content. So working with a company, SEMA, we bought a software called Atlantic Link, and we've now created our own assessments, both knowledge-based assessments, maybe about how to make coffee or whatever it may be, as well as behavioural assessments as well, that people have to do online. And there has been, as I say, a direct cost saving there of about £15,000 to £16,000 per group in terms of bringing people together to do that assessment in a room, which is what we were doing before. Obviously, I've already mentioned the workbook, and this is just a photograph of a typical workbook that we had that was, I don't know, about that thick. As you can imagine, they get lost, people drop coffee on them, the dog ate my homework, that kind of thing. I have to say I've not yet had anyone say the dog's ate the iPad, but I'm sure that's coming soon, an expensive meal. But what we did working with TWM was to create a workbook creator tool that allows us to create any style of workbook that we want online. And this is an example of the initial home page. You then sort of delve into the workbook, you've got the various sections, the chapter headings, if you like, and it enables you to go in and download your answer sheet. And this is an important point, and go back to my comment at the beginning about a windswept railway station. You're not going to be permanently connected. And I'm sorry to say this in the Learning Technologies Conference, but the reality is there are many places where you can't even get 3G signal, let alone Wi-Fi. So we needed to have the ability to download the worksheet, complete it offline, either on your laptop or your iPad or whatever it may be, and then upload it. That was important. That's one of the things we built into the tool. What you're seeing here is just a typical example of someone's personal dashboard, if you like. And I can see here that this particular individual has completed their SWOT analysis, all done. But what's happening here is that the worksheet has not yet been downloaded by the manager. So I would know that John has done his worksheet. I would now need his manager to download that, complete any marking that I need to do, and then that gets uploaded and the system updates as we go. So I can see at any one time as the employee, where am I at, and has my manager done what he or she needed to do, and the manager can get to see that as well. And again, that physical ability, anytime, anywhere, many managers say, actually, it's quite good on the way home on the train. I can just look at John's worksheet. I don't have to physically be with John at that time. I don't have to physically be in the unit or the restaurant to do it. Giving them the freedom in the same way as we're giving the learner the freedom of any time, anywhere. I'm not quite sure why we have a US stroke English flag here, because it's the English language, for God's sake. It's not Bill Gates. But this is a point about we have our e-learning workshops, I mentioned from Demos, that we now have in English, we have it in Spanish, German, and I think Portuguese as well. So we have the opportunity, as we do have people working in the UK from overseas, that can actually do the e-learning in their own language, which again has helped from an accessibility point of view. The e-learning for us, we wanted it to be fun, interactive. If you were to sit there and do the session in one go, probably 30 to 45 minutes in length, but you have the ability to do 5 minutes, stop, save it, come back to it. And again, imagine you could be serving You know, Monday morning commuter rush, very busy in the station, you don't get a lot of time, you might have a break for 10 minutes, and that's when you get the opportunity to do 5-10 minutes of your discovery. Then you go back serving, carry on later that day or later that week. This had to be flexible to work in that kind of environment. This is an example of a screenshot from our e-learning content that we develop ourselves using elearing. This is where we host it. And you probably can't necessarily see the detail, but the kind of programs we have, barista training, food and health safety training, information about the organisation, IT training around how to use the till system, etc. So a lot of clearly knowledge-based training that's built in. Now this next slide is probably one of the most unexciting, unsexy that I could possibly have put in. And I nearly took it out, but I left it in very deliberately. I think it's fairly safe to say that sort of sexy and exciting doesn't tend to go with government and audit, tend not to come together. But I wanted to say that as an organisation, if you were thinking about going down the route, I couldn't recommend ICQ enough as a partner to say, how can we work with you to make it as seamless, as integrated as we possibly can? Very important from the user's experience. Sometimes it's more work at our end from an HR and L&D point of view to make it work from a reporting perspective. But we wanted to make sure that the user logged on to one thing, Academy Live, and they did their discovery program through that. Now, I mentioned the line manager engagement as being absolutely critical. I think the time issue, as I mentioned, people being able to touch the e-learning when it was convenient to them as the learner, but equally as the manager. But I'm a great believer in that three-legged stool. There's the individual, there's L&D, and there's the line manager. And if any of those legs are missing, we all know the stool falls over. So this was about giving management information and management visibility to that manager and his or her line manager. Now, as an example, what I might see is on the left-hand side here, if I want to see an individual, I want to go into John's learning file, I can do that. But equally, if I just want to understand what's going on in my airport, what's going on in my region, I can see that kind of information too. This is an example here of one particular pathway. The line manager has a number of people on the program and can very quickly see what percentage that individual is through all of the elements of the program. Those elements might be attending a workshop, completing an e-learning course, conducting a test and completing that test, maybe even reading a book review and then having to upload their reflections, learning log. All of the typical elements that you'd expect to see in a blended learning approach can be signposted along the way to say, yeah, you've now moved another 5%, another 10%, another 20% along the program. Equally, if I actually wanted to go into detail and see what John has done, I can do that. We have our little totalizer here, a little man running across the screen, giving us that visual indication of how much has John done of the particular program. Now, this was developed initially for our program about discovery, perhaps, but this approach is now being applied to other programs in SSP that you saw in that leadership ladder at the beginning, the globe. And for example, USA, our business over there, as you can imagine, a very large geographic country. We operate in airports all over, from the west to the east coast. Getting managers in a plane, flying them together for a training course is not something we're going to do a great deal of. So using this kind of technology, using virtual classroom, WebEx, Adobe Connect, whatever those kind of systems you may use, are absolutely critical to building a program internationally as well. What are some of the key implications that we found in terms of moving to a mobile approach? Well, I've touched upon one of this already, hardware, the infrastructure. There's a big debate about bring your own device to work. Do we allow people to bring their own iPads and have them sat on the counter, or their BlackBerry devices, or whatever it may be? And what's been interesting is that the biggest percentage has been people are using their own devices, partly because they feel they have to. They can't get access enough to the company PCs. We have not solved this problem yet. I'm not suggesting we have. We know the solution. The solution is to put some kind of device, a tablet probably, into our restaurants, into our units that can be used for a number of purposes, not just e-learning, communication, product training, whatever it may be. That's ultimately the solution. But it's not an easy win, and it's not an easy fight when you think about the cost of some of that technology. So we have allowed people to access this information and access the program remotely. And that's an important point for our Academy Live. It's a web-based system that you can access anywhere, anytime, as I say. It doesn't have to be through the company's PCs. I think people often jump to the technology first, the hardware, great, important, need to understand it. But one of the bigger problems is connectivity. And again, you can be in an airport where the airport owner says, right, I own the Wi-Fi here, and if you want to use it, that's going to be £25 an hour, please, as a provider, as a restaurant or a retail store. We don't get to use it for free. Clearly, if you're paying 3G charges around the world, as I'm sure many of you know, that can get very, very expensive. So the connectivity challenge, if you're thinking of going down that route, please, please, learn from us, don't forget about it, don't ignore it. Don't spend all of your time thinking about, should we give them a Samsung Note or should we give them an iPad? Think about the connectivity challenges too. And to be honest, the people capability has been an interesting one, to assume that everybody knows how to use a laptop. Everybody knows how to use an iPad. And the reality is they don't. And we've all heard the joke, you know, people ring up, it says to press any key, but I can't see a key that says any key. But I don't know if about you, that's actually happened to me. Someone has actually asked me that question. And sometimes we just need to, it's not about necessarily going down to the lowest common denominator, but it is about thinking about reality. And one of the most crazy but light bulb moments for me in terms of a question was someone asking me, I need to make in my restaurant beans on toast. Do I put the beans on first or the toast? I was like, the clue's kind of in what it's called, beans on toast. But we really did need to get to that level of detail in terms of steps. So maybe what we need is visual learning where people can see the toast being put on the plate first, then the beans being spooned over. And I'm not being facetious, but that is a genuine question and sometimes a genuine challenge. So you have to think about the capability of the people using it. Not just the learner, but the line manager as well. So why would you be interested in doing this fundamentally? Some of the key stats that we've seen is we've increased the amount of people being promoted from the program, which is very important for us, clearly. It is about developing the next generation of managers. We also saw a bigger dropout rate. And at first, we were like, oh, clearly that's not good. But actually, the reality is, the fact that it's now a qualification, it is more robust, there's more content there, it is harder to complete, and it takes slightly longer. Perhaps it was naive of us not to realise that there would be a higher dropout rate initially. We're also very pleased that about 75% of people who have completed, and this blended learning version of Discovery is about 18 months old now, so we've had 1 whole year complete. About 75% of those completed are still using our Academy Live site. So they didn't have to continue using it, but it wasn't taken away from them either. And it's good to see that those people who were interested in succession, interested in progression, are continuing to use the resource that is at hand to develop themselves. And we like to track people who perhaps aren't on some of these programs, just to see, well, who is knocking on the door, who is doing more than they need to demonstrate a willingness to learn more. I've said the line manager visibility is critical, and I think that's helped the success of the number of people promoted, because line managers, there was nowhere to hide anymore. I couldn't say, well, I haven't had a chance to sit down with John because I haven't seen him for a couple of shifts. You could access it anywhere. And your boss could access it as well. And we all know we value what our boss values, what our boss measures, we measure too. So because of that visibility across the estate, we've definitely improved the engagement of line managers. We all know that virtual learning reality and e-learning, etc., is becoming much more the norm. And the generation, whether you call them the digital, the millennials, whatever tag you want to put on them, they are far more used and enjoying the use of e-learning tools. But not in a prescribed, you will do it this way. They like the flexibility to go on when it suits them for a shorter period of time as they want or as longer period of time as they want. They want control as well as the tools to do it. And that goes back to that challenge of infrastructure. Do you expect people to use their own device? Or do you expect people, or do we provide that device? I can't believe many organisations would say, can you bring your own pad to work and your own pencil? And yet, in a sense, we're saying bring your own e-learning equipment. It's a challenge for us, as I'm sure it probably is as well. We have seen some cost savings in terms of not having the initial bringing people together for the assessment. The paper-based materials, I think it's about €8,000 in Germany in one of our other programs at Pathfinder, where we decided to move to an online solution. But I have to say we haven't done this because we wanted to save money. We've done this because we genuinely believe it has made the program more robust. It's given us a better quality manager at the end, which fundamentally is what it's all about. Ultimately, we want to end up with that manager who's ready to succeed. And as I say, it's great that we've got people who are continuing to use the Academy Live resource once they've finished the program. But the interesting thing for us is that people who have gone through the program, been successful, now doing a great job as managers, guess what? They are some of our best advocates, our best ambassadors for training the next generation. So we're on a journey. We're delighted with our progress so far. A lot more to do. In terms of any questions you may have, I'm going to hand over to Stefan now, but we're going to take any joint questions at the end. So please don't hesitate. If you do have any questions, give them to me at the end. But thank you for your time today. And let me hand over to Phil, I think.
Thanks, Lee. Thank you.